Good morning. Welcome back into Wake Up America. The big question people are asking now, will China actually invade Taiwan? And do they like what they're seeing play out in Ukraine right now? Two questions that, of course, remain unanswered as you wake up this morning, as many draw comparisons between Russia before invading Ukraine to China's behavior right now. Could history repeat itself? For more on this, let's welcome in former Trump Deputy National Security Advisor and board member for the American Conservative Union, KT McFarland, back with us this morning. KT, good morning. Good to see you.
Always good to see you, Rob. Thank you.
KT, the Wall Street Journal over the weekend said, quote, after 100 days, Russia's war on Ukraine is turning into a bloody slog with no end in sight. So my question, how long can this war go on, and how long can the West remain engaged in this war and the costs, the $40 billion that we're sending right now, if the war is already at a stalemate?
Look, the war can go on indefinitely from Russia's perspective, because they've got the money to do it. Why? Because energy prices are high. What's Russia's main export? Oil and natural gas. The other reason Russia is rich right now is because of grain exports. Russia's one of the world's largest exporters of wheat and grain products. Well, what happened to those? Those are going to go high. Those are probably going to go higher if the Russians do take those southern ports on the Black Sea and then blockade them, preventing Ukrainian foodstuffs to leave port.
Yeah, the other part of the story that doesn't get talked about, I think, is the refugee mess that the world is involved in. So right now, according to the UN, this out on Monday, 6.9 million Ukrainians have been forced to leave their country. Poland has taken in the vast majority, almost 4 million right now. Many will never return to Ukraine. How does the country deal with a population loss like that once this war is over, if Ukraine does, in fact, manage to get out of this war without Russia taking control of too much of the country?
Well, a lot of those people will stay. You know, they will have made lives for themselves because, look, it's going, even if the fighting stopped tomorrow, Ukraine has to be rebuilt. How long is that going to take? That's going to take several years. So I think there's a good percentage of the people who've already left Ukraine who will probably stay wherever they are in Europe. One kind of refugee, the kind of refugee crisis I'm worried about is what happens if Russia weaponizes food. If Russia blockades those ports on the Black Sea that export Ukrainian wheat, Ukrainian sunflower oil, major components in everything from fast foods to daily staples. And most of the imports of those will go to poor countries. But poor countries won't be able to afford that. So what will that mean? That'll mean another refugee crisis.
Yeah.
Because let's say that, you know, Egypt, the Middle East, Africa, even South America, if they can't afford to buy foodstuffs on the international market, their people are going to leave. Where are they going to go? Southern border of the United States. Particularly, they're going to go to Europe. That's why the Europeans, I think, are so upset by what the next phase of this Russia war could be, which is in the Black Sea.
And KT, so we've talked about this before. Afghanistan, Russia invades Afghanistan. That lasts for a decade, and Afghanistan still has not recovered. The population lost, the refugees, the people of Afghanistan, we were their allies then. They were forced to flee. Afghanistan, you could argue, never recovered. The same thing could happen in Ukraine. Do you think that does NATO need to get involved militarily to opening up the Black Sea and opening up those shipping channels? Do we go there?
Okay,
do we go that far?
I don't know. I don't think that NATO should get involved militarily.
Okay.
We should give the Ukrainians whatever they need to fight for themselves by themselves. However, if there is a humanitarian crisis and wheat can't and foodstuffs can't get out of the Black Sea and go around the world, that is a humanitarian crisis that affects everybody. I think that we should have naval escorts, not just American. Don't put American naval ships there alone. Every country with a navy should send a ship to try to escort a convoy of foodstuffs out of the Black Sea. And do it now before the Russians take those ports. Do it as a deterrent. And the important thing about doing is, and let's see who shows up. Will the Chinese show up? The Chinese are just building a huge global navy. Would they want to help the third world by helping the foodstuffs from Ukraine get to the world market?
Right.
Good question.
Yeah, very good question. And what does that mean? Would that mean military engagement if our ships are staring each other down in the Black Sea? But a very good question. I want to go to China right now, KT, since you brought China up. Yesterday, a tweet from the Associated Press. The South Korean and U.S. militaries flew 20 fighter jets over South Korea's Western Sea in a continued show of force as a U.S. official warned of a forceful response if North Korea goes ahead with its first nuclear test explosion in nearly 5 years. What do you make of that and the fact that things are heating up, not just between China and Taiwan, but with North Korea again as well, something that was put on pause at least during the Trump years?
Yeah, and North Korea was one of the things I worked on in the Trump administration. And I think it's not a coincidence that we didn't have any tests of this sort during the Trump administration out of North Korea. I think the North Koreans will test. I think they'll continue to test longer and longer range missiles, and they'll continue to test nuclear weapons. They want to show the world and show a Biden administration and a sort of discombobulated West what they can do. You know, it's a cardinal rule of foreign policy that if countries, your adversaries, sense weakness, that's when they make their move. So it's not a surprise that Iran's getting nuclear weapons. North Korea is testing. China is building naval bases all over the world. The Russians invade Ukraine. Why are they doing it? Because the leader of the free world is perceived as weak and preoccupied with other matters and domestically in real trouble politically.
Yeah, good points. KT McFarland, thanks so much for the expertise. Great to see you again. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
All right. Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.